Good evening, everyone. I'm Leo Sarley. I'm chair of the ZOCO committee, and these are the opening remarks that we usually do, so I'll get right to them. Welcome to the May 14th, 2024 zoning committee meeting. We will be holding this hybrid public meeting, which enables remote electronic participation as legally authorized by the Code of Virginia for the Planning Commission's electronic meeting policy adopted on July 7th, 2022. Members of the ZOCO are participating both here and in person and virtually through electronic means. At this time, I'd like to orient everyone to our hybrid environment and cover a few specifics about how tonight's meeting will run. Members of the public may attend here in person or electronically by using the Microsoft Teams link provided by the ZOCO webpage and county's event calendar and the email notification sent to ZOCO email subscribers. Additionally, there's a dial-in phone option for those who wish to use it. For virtual attendees using Microsoft Teams, please turn off your video feed and keep your microphones muted as you enter the meeting and during the meeting. The Microsoft Teams meeting chat will only be used to provide instructions for virtual attendees on how to register for public comment and to field general questions about Microsoft Teams. The Teams chat will not otherwise be monitored by staff or the Planning Commission during the meeting, nor will it be used to collect feedback. Unlike the Planning Commission's regular meetings, ZOCO agenda items are not public hearings. Therefore, it's the chair's discretion to allow for public comments, but we are planning to have public comments this evening if anyone wishes to do so. Public comments associated with agenda items can be provided by people attending in person and virtually. For in-person attendees, indicate on the meeting sign-in sheet that you would like to provide public comment. Virtual attendees, indicate in the Teams chat that you would like to provide public comment and your name will be added to the list of speakers. As a reminder, you can always provide written comments via the link that is provided in the Teams chat and on ZOCO's website. All written comments, whether on paper or online, will be shared with the Planning Commission and posted to the ZOCO page of public viewing. All comments received as of noon today have already been shared with ZOCO. I will call for speakers at the end of the meeting, and I will ask Mr. Rogers to let me know if we have virtual attendees who would like to provide comment. Mr. Rogers will acknowledge speaker in the Teams chat. Members of the public attending virtually will speak first, followed by in-person attendees. The virtual attendees are called upon to speak. You must unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon that is located on the meeting command bar. The moderator does not have the ability to unmute you. Lastly, this is a public forum. Today's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county website. All information associated with today's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to the Freedom of Information Act. Great. There, that's out of the way. So again, my name is Leo Sarley. I'm chair of the ZOCO and I'm with the Planning Commission. And so we'll go around and do introductions starting to my left.
Nick Rogers with county staff.
Great.
Ellie Henry, Roslyn Bit.
Jim Lantelme, Planning Commission.
Anthony Pusarelli with the Planning Division.
Karen Gavada, Planning Commission.
Peter Robertson, Planning Commission.
Thank you all. And then any online members of the committee or even public that might want to introduce themselves?
Nick Cummings here.
Staff, thank you for coming, Nick. All right. With that, I think welcome everybody, and I will turn it over to Mr. Nick Rogers for his presentation.
Wonderful. And I hope to be brief, but cover some detailed ground on your agenda tonight for you all, Mr. Chair. So what's before you tonight is some work that we've been developing, of course, in coordination, as always, with our zoning division and with the county attorney's office, related to adjustments to the CO Roslyn district, specifically the provisions that authorize the county board to approve density above those districts' maximum provisions. The maximum is 10.0 FAR. There are some provisions in there that enable the board to go above and beyond that 10.0 FAR. And what we worked up is some additional flexibility. And I'll go into some of the details in that regard. Obviously not going to read this slide for verbatim. As you know, Mr. Chair, what we always do is we always post these presentations to the ZOCO page after the meeting, but there are a number of key terms that I wanted to make sure that members of the public and yourselves were just kind of refreshed and re-educated on, because this language does get technical when we're talking about site plans and density and gross floor area and the lot area and gross parking area as well. And I'm happy to unravel as much of that as needed. You've also got your memo that was posted on Friday that helps with some of that verbiage. So I mentioned at the outset of our discussion tonight that we'd be focusing on the CO Roslyn zoning district. And this zoning district was first adopted by the county board in 1996 out of an early 1990s effort to re-envision, reimagine, and take a hard look at the planning, the long-term vision for Roslyn. The idea at the time was that Roslyn should be and needed to be a first-class urban center. When you take a look at some of the staff reports and the analysis that was documented at the time, the planning staff, members of the community, elected and appointed officials really saw Roslyn and as something that needed to be competitive and should continue to be a key destination both for residences, but also for commercial activity within Arlington County. And so what the analysis and the observations showed was that the initial generation and the initial era of development in Roslyn had really occurred back in the 1960s and 1970s. And that first generation was starting to begin to reach the end of its design life cycle. And new development had continued to occur, in particularly the staff reports highlight downtown Washington, D.C., development activity in the range of 6.5 to 12 FAR. And there were some concerns that Roslyn would not be able to maintain its competitive advantages and primacy if the existing CO district provisions stayed in effect and went unchanged. And so there was a community planning effort that resulted in this addendum in 1992 to the Roslyn Station area plan. And out of that was to implement that plan was the creation of a new district that maintained and carried forward the maximum density provisions in the CO district, 3.8 for office, service, commercial, and retail, 4.8 for residential and hotel. But there was this additional opportunity for developers to go above and beyond, up to 10.0 FAR, subject to provisions and adherence to the Roslyn Station Area Plan addendum. And I have more on for the purposes of our presentation today. I won't go into all of the details of that, but we do have some background information on that in the staff report. Roslyn has continued to mature and to evolve and to remain dynamic over the past 3 decades almost since that original 1996 action. The board itself has taken a couple different amendments to those original district provisions. First, in 2007, there were a couple different edits. The one I'll focus mostly in on was an increase in maximum height. There was an original from 1996 that the thought was 300 feet would about get to what was needed in order to realize that vision, but further attention was put on the identified central place itself, and additional development opportunities were afforded, additional height opportunities were afforded for the central place area identified in the plans. And then in 2016, more at the heart of your matter tonight, the board and planning staff and members of the public who were involved with the Realize Roslyn effort found that 10.0 FAR may actually not be adequate in order to achieve significant opportunities to really realize 2 very important elements that were called for in the forthcoming and newly revised Roslyn sector plan. The first was the implementation. You can kind of see it in the image here on your viewer, the implementation of the 18th Street North corridor, this new boulevard, this new corridor that would organize and define Roslyn, number one. And then number two, there was the thought that in order to achieve some of the transportation opportunities specifically related to significantly increasing metro rail capacity for the Roslyn station itself, there may need to be additional development opportunities for that to be integrated into site plan approvals as a community benefit as called for in the Roslyn sector plan. So the board authorized an amendment, the board adopted amendments to the zoning ordinance that should a development applicant be able to check all of those boxes in the sector plan and really meet that higher test, that the board could go above and beyond that 10.0 that was originally adopted in 1996. So that gives you the background and history on the CO district itself. A quick primer on how and this is really a speed run on how we address density in site plan approvals. The zoning district for the individual development project does have a maximum density requirement. I've talked a lot about floor area ratio tonight. Sometimes that's in dwelling units per acre. Those are typically the two where it's expressed. But here in Arlington, we have incentive zoning, bonus density that can be afforded through section 1559 of the zoning ordinance. And it gives the board the authority to approve additional height. We're talking about the density tonight, but additional height and density above those maximum district provisions, so long as a series of community benefits and are provided and the adverse impacts associated with that increased density can be addressed. And a lot of how much of that and the orientation of that really does, when we won't get into a lot of the details, because it's really based on the area plan that's governing the future vision for the particular development site, the sector plan, whatever our adopted planning policies are calling for. So it's really evaluated on a specific case-by-case basis. But you can see, and these are from the zoning ordinance. This is sort of the menu of different items that an applicant should be considering when attempting to reach those density provisions, again, above and beyond what the zoning ordinance would otherwise require them to adhere them to. So I mentioned a specific section in the zoning ordinance, section 1559. That is what governs those additional density requests above and beyond for the vast majority of our zoning districts. But CO Roslyn is an exception. CO Roslyn was those additional density provisions that I was mentioning previously related to 18th Street North, related to the significant capacity increases in Metro Rail. Those are encapsulated within the CO Roslyn district standards themselves in Article 7, Section 715. And so those district standards specifically say that don't look at 1559 in order to address and assess how you get to that 10-point FAR. You look within the district provisions, and so we've covered some of those policy reasons behind that. But the mechanism of it has that under no circumstances language, and so when that under no circumstances language that's in the zoning ordinance, it's an absolute. And so perhaps if the project from a planning perspective, from a policy perspective, if all parties agreed that the applicant may have sort of a worthy cause and can address those impacts, that 10.0 cap is firm and cannot be breached unless it meets one of those two requirements that I mentioned previously. The third, the text does allow for transfer of development rights, not really applicable to what we're speaking to tonight, but that provision is within the zoning ordinance itself. So it is public knowledge that CoStar Group is intending to relocate its global headquarters here to Arlington. And their intention is to relocate to the Central Place Tower office building within Roslyn. So I have the details on this, which are available publicly through the press release that was provided back in February. Some of the key details on that, the press release mentioned that the board would be taking a series of land use actions in order to facilitate the economic development deal. And amongst those land use actions is related to this maximum of 10.0 FAR. The Central Place Tower, when you take a look at the approved site plan and the approved development conditions, the development through several through a site plan, a major amendment that was adopted back in 2007, and then subsequent amendments since then has realized all of that available density up to that 10.0 FAR cap. Members of the public and members of the commission know that one of the community benefits, one of the public amenities associated with this project is an observation deck that's publicly accessible. The gross floor area of that observation deck was excluded from, it was not counted, it was excluded from that density calculation back when with those previous Central Place Tower site plan approvals. And so with this public amenity being converted to private gross floor area, the loss of that public amenity would result in that gross floor area being calculated. And when you do that calculation, it actually exceeds the 10.0 FAR cap. And so I've mentioned 18th Street North, I've mentioned Metro Rail capacity a couple different times. Neither one of the conversion of a public amenity in, whether it's here or anywhere else in CO Roslyn, would not meet one of those two tests. And so with this announcement, it the staff has been directed to develop the study, to look at things and see, well, what sort of options could be available for facilitating such a conversion of gross floor area. So, in taking a look at the objectives, yes, there's the CoStar economic development deal that I've mentioned, but we've also, and anecdotally, we've heard from other property owners, other members of the development community who have approached staff in the past and have identified ancillary spaces. We talk about this in the memo a little bit, below ground storage areas, other sort of corners, other mechanical areas within the buildings that they have sort of theorized and approached staff saying, hey, we'd like to do a little something different with this space. Is there some sort of opportunity where we could convert this? We know that we're at or near our 10.0 FAR cap, but is there an opportunity to sort of change things around, reconfigure things around? And in those instances when they're right at when the result of that action would have them going above the 10.0 FAR, we end up saying no, like don't file it. It wouldn't be allowed by the zoning ordinance. And so, there are other opportunities that we are seeing for smaller scale adaptations. We do expect that there may be some other property owners that if the board were to adopt some sort of additional flexibility, they would likely re-engage with staff to start re-exploring some of those different opportunities. And so with the recommended approach that we've developed would be to really focus not on brand new projects, some of the redevelopment, kind of like what was being envisioned and talked about when the CO Roslyn district was being formulated back in the 90s. That next generation of development. This sort of flexibility that we've happened upon is really more targeted for approved projects. Buildings that are already here with us today, or perhaps something that has their entitlement and is under construction, or the applicant through different tenants or different funding mechanisms is saying, hey, I might like to make a minor adjustment to what was previously approved to reposition some of that space internal to the building. So we really, and so the proposed zoning text that we've attached to the staff memo tonight would allow the conversions of some of those spaces that were previously excluded or not counted. Again, the mechanical areas, the storage areas, some of those ancillary spaces that are not intended to be used on any sort of everyday basis by the tenants of the building, the retail customers, employees who may be working in the buildings. The other area that and this is more forward thinking. The other area that we wanted to account for, because we have received requests for this in the past, is for the conversion of gross parking area. So recall that original slide that I had related to gross parking area. The parking spaces in structured parking for a building, not just in CO Roslyn, but anywhere in Arlington, those are not counted. Parking is not counted toward the building's gross floor area and accounted for in that approved density for an individual project. But there may be scenarios where technology changes, travel demand changes, travel patterns are adjusted, where a property owner may have a modicum of surplus parking spaces that could be converted to some sort of alternative use, either on a small scale or a larger scale. And so we see an opportunity for increases above 10.0 FAR for these types of conversions of parking. What I want to keep in mind is that I mentioned, and I'll get to the outside of the study scope in a moment. Keep in mind how whether you're dealing with 1559 or whether you're dealing with the CO Roslyn standards themselves, any amount of increase beyond that maximum density requirement where the board is accounting for those special provisions, the board is looking for the developer to provide community benefits, a package to mitigate those impacts. And so whether it's this small, we've talked some about the CoStar, the conversion of the gross floor area there, or if it's a conversion of forced parking spaces to some sort of more occupiable space, the applicant would need to provide a rationale and provide a benefit to the public in accordance with our adopted policies and plans and priorities. And so it's not just, hey, reconvert your space and bump up the density. There's going to be an expectation, and this would be with our current planning staff, who would work very closely with the applicant. Current planning staff would identify those opportunities in coordination with the development applicant. The Roslyn sector plan, just to be clear, the Roslyn sector plan, that there wouldn't be any adjustments or changes to that. The plans and policies that are encapsulated with that community vision would stay the same. So there hasn't been anything associated with that within our study scope. As well as that 10.0 FAR, we still continue to feel that is the appropriate maximum density that continues to allow the 10.0 with the two exceptions related to 18th Street North and for Metro Rail increased capacity. We still feel that continues to be adequate to account for the development opportunities to meet the Roslyn sector plan. So any those types of more bigger picture adjustments are not within the scope of study for this particular analysis. And what I'll close on is just some of the community engagement that has been occurred. We've been providing some periodic email updates, just a few of these, to some of the property owners within Roslyn, both residential and commercial, the Economic Development Commission, the Industrial Development Authority, the bids and partnerships, both within Roslyn and adjacent to Roslyn, and as well as the Chamber of Commerce and some of our adjacent civic associations as well. So we have been coordinating, and that has been done in coordination with our partners in Arlington Economic Development. This is a text amendment that is within that commercial market resiliency initiative umbrella. So the board took action to adopt a request to advertise to hear this no earlier than their July 20th public hearing. So we're here briefing you tonight on sort of this where we've come and where we've landed on our recommendations. We do anticipate that keeping our current schedule, this would be back before you for your July public hearings. And then the board, we anticipate, would be taking action soon thereafter, not just on a zoning text amendment, but also a minor site plan amendment, vacating the public easements associated with the observation deck, and then economic development funding at the state level. Again, I do want to focus for our members of the public who are reviewing tonight, as well as our commissioners. We're really just focused on the zoning text amendment tonight, and these other actions, while they're part of the process, are going to be under separate review. So, Mr. Chair, I think I've said enough, and I'll turn things over to you and your colleagues.
Thank you, Nick. I appreciate the presentation. All right, with that, the conversations with the committee. I would suggest clarifying questions or any sort of feedback, but otherwise, let's just dive in.
Yeah, a number of the things on this actually answer questions I had walking in here, such as it wouldn't be just one building, it would be any other buildings. Because the building I immediately thought of was not the CoStar to be building,
Sure.
but the Our Lady of Exxon development site. Because when we approved that, one of the things that was in it was when they did the parking, they specifically said it was being built to specs that it could be at some point converted to occupied space, but they maxed out on the density.
Yeah.
So that was always hanging in the background. So this answers that question. So that, I think that's positive. I really like, we're over parked pretty much everywhere. And wherever we can convert parking into occupied space, it's a win for the county. So that I think is a good flexibility that I strongly approve of. That it's not for future site plans is important because we're still trying to get 18th Street built.
Yeah.
There's at least 2 or 3 sites that are not ready for redevelopment or not being proposed for redevelopment where the 18th Street corridor would go through. So we need to have incentives there for those. And I don't want somebody gaming the system. So that, that's fine. These would then be minor site plan amendments for any of them to come through, or is it just CoStar is going to be a minor site plan amendment if the zoning ordinance changes?
Case by case basis, every site plan is going to be different.
Okay.
I think we would anticipate that the vast majority of these would be minor site plans, just given how the thresholds for the thresholds for what triggers a minor versus major in the zoning ordinance. I think we're anticipating that these are all going to be minors.
And for clarifying, since some of these projects have not been built yet, but would fall under this. For example, I'm thinking about the Watergate garage up the street, which has been sitting there for years. They could ask for conversion of already approved space. They could not come in and say, oh, we want to put another story on top of it.
That's correct.
Okay, so it's within what's already approved, the envelope of what's already approved is where they can convert, but not adding additional square footage to the project itself.
That's correct.
Okay, good. That's a good clarifying answer.
Although you are adding density, right?
Not mass.
Correct.
That's what I'm trying to
It's
get
not
at.
a new structure.
Right, we're not adding mass by this. We're simply converting existing mass to what had been not considered density to what's considered density, but the overall mass will be the same.
That's correct.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I think those were where my concerns were,
Mhm.
which you've now addressed.
Great. Peter, Karen? Right. I had a few questions, so I'll jump in to make sure I understand. These are just, again, clarifying. And does this is there a difference between underground and above ground parking at all on this calculation for density? No, so any density below ground, if they convert it to something like mushroom farm, that would still go towards their density count?
That's right. Yeah, the definition for gross parking area, it's very inclusive. It doesn't differentiate whether the parking is subterranean or visible by a pedestrian, for example.
I'm pontificating a little bit, but would we be interested in encouraging above ground conversion? We can talk about this offline, but it's just, I would love to see any and all above ground parking garages go away, is sort of what I'm trying to get to, before we start converting underground.
Yeah, the one I'm talking about, they built the above ground parking
Right,
to convert
right,
potentially.
right. And then the other thing, that Commissioner Montelmi referenced, the notion of gaming the system, and that's clearly not something that we're ready to, right? In other words, I come in, I max my height beyond, sort of everything else, because I build all this above ground parking. We complain about it during the process, but it goes ahead anyways. And then they come back and say, oh, we changed our mind, we don't need that much parking. So that cannot be done.
Yeah, so how I'll respond to your sort of scenario, Commissioner Sarley, is again, going back to the plan, going back to the sector plan. The sector plan has very clear guidance on form, character, use, the type of development that we're looking for, and empty space. And we have had examples of this through the development process. Perhaps you've even seen it in SPRC, where a development applicant is looking to provide that extra space for some sort of aspirational potential conversion in the future with what we feel is an excess perhaps of above ground parking, something that the Roslyn sector plan, as you know, discourages. And in those instances, staff has pretty vociferously pushed back and advocated for redesigns, reconfigurations of the design to minimize any sort of above ground parking as much as possible. There are some real constraints in Roslyn, given where the subterranean surface of bedrock is. We can't necessarily go down because of the unique geology that we see in Roslyn compared to other areas. But again, I guess the other thing, Commissioner Sarley, I just sort of remind the commissioners of is that sort of concept of a free lunch, any sort of density above and beyond the 3.8 or the 4.8, even if it's a scintilla, it's got to be earned. The developer has to provide it, whether it's 4 parking spaces or 400 parking spaces, to kind of use two very extreme examples. The development applicant would need to provide community benefits in accordance with the Roslyn sector plan and in accordance with the zoning ordinance in order to earn that ability for the board to approve that modification.
Great, thanks. That's kind of what I wanted to hear. Anything else? Okay. And then the other thing you mentioned where there were a couple options like the 18th Street and the Metro Rail, and those are the only 2 options currently available. And we're looking to add a third one.
That's correct.
So and that's the case of the CoStar, where they would contribute to the Gateway Park. And that's so in the zoning, we're going to add language that adds flexibility, or that can be strictly the park.
I would say more flexibility, but I think if I'm answering your question correctly, that whatever the benefit or whatever is in the benefits package is again really going to be subject to the uniqueness of that site, and how it's going to be subject to what was the community benefits package that was previously approved for that site plan. What are the opportunities that applicant has identified to honor and meet the goals and objectives of the Roslyn sector plan. In this case, in the public announcement that the board has made, the board is indicating that CoStar is intending, as part of their community benefit, to provide this 13.9 million that is intended to be earmarked for the reconstruction of Gateway Park. But again, that is one example of one applicant in one type of community benefit. We would not we could expect a variety of different things that are laid out in the Roslyn sector plan to be potentials for consideration.
So there is guidance in the sector plan for this?
And actually, if I could just add
Please.
a finer point, I think to your question about the language specifically that would be added and introduced. The language that is currently proposed and drafted with the memo, basically, it doesn't speak to the public observation deck specifically. It doesn't speak to public spaces. What it says is that if you have through a previously approved site plan in CO Roslyn, if you had space, so to speak, within your project that was excluded from the FAR calculation, and you wanted to repurpose it as space that would count towards FAR, then that would be an additional mechanism through which you can exceed 10.0. And the same thing with gross parking area. If you were to want to convert, a level of above grade parking, which never would have calculated as part of the FAR computations, to now convert it to residential use, if that conversion pushed you above 10, then the board could approve that. So the language itself is really specific about previously excluded density, so to speak, or floor area that was previously excluded from the FAR,
Right.
could be converted to then exceed 10, or gross parking area could be converted to exceed 10. So that's the language that's proposed for the amendment.
Mr. Chairman, follow up on it?
Yes.
So having now the three things going forward, it would be Metro Rail, 18th Street, and then Gateway Park. But is it Gateway Park or is it any park type facility within that area?
No, so there is no, I guess, the point that I was probably able to
I'm not
make more
getting.
clearly is that there's no reference in, and I don't know if we have the ability to pull up the draft text or, but there is no reference to the park in the draft zoning text, right? And so in addition to the existing provisions in the CO Roslyn district that a project could exceed 10.0 FAR if it's helping to achieve a segment of 18th Street North, if it's helping to improve the Metro Rail capacity for that area, right? So that would be within sort of sub-bullet A. We are introducing a sub-bullet B that says, if you had building space that was previously excluded from the FAR calculations, and you want to reuse it in a way that would have to be counted in the density calculations, then, and if that pushed you over the 10.0, then that's okay. The board can approve that, right? So there's no reference.
But there's no additional check you have to write to have that happen?
Well, no. There is, but it's.
Where does it go? I mean,
So I guess, yeah, let me
So
see
there-
if I can reword that if you don't mind me interrupting. How would you earn that? So I think that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing
Right.
two options to earn it. What's the third option? And does the sector
Or is
plan
it-
advise?
No, so the way, and I think as Nick was saying, the way it would be a negotiation. Okay. Right, as would any achievement of additional density above 3.8 or 4.8. So I would, there are other recent amendments, particularly in the Crystal City area, where after the initial approval, site plans have sought to get additional density around the margins, right? But they're with that additional density, since it's above the 3.8 or the 4.8 FAR limits, there is a negotiation that typically occurs, and then it would be maybe an additional contribution towards AHIF.
so it'd be, okay, so it'd be the basic menu that we already have would be in play in the negotiations.
Correct. But so in practice, the negotiations that typically happen would still happen for any project that is looking to enjoy this proposed provision. It's just not explicitly stated in the text that it would be
But
for
the
public
negotiations,
space.
every site has a different priority for what those negotiations are. I get that. So we're doing the same thing here, that somebody walks in, there will be a list that the county would prefer, like these rather than that type of thing. That'll be the negotiation.
Correct.
Okay, because that answered my other question, which I didn't quite get to raise, but this is in my mind that there's no further metro rail improvement that we need. And Gateway Park is fully funded, it's done. So what then would you, well, now we know there's lots of other things we can do. We don't have to wait for the third tunnel for Metro 30 years from now, you know.
No, okay. No, that's, I appreciate that greater clarity in terms of where the question was coming from. No, it would go, what we would do is we would go back to the adopted plan, the Roslyn sector plan, and look at what are the other goals and amenities and features that we're trying to achieve.
Stuff in Roslyn. So yeah, that I'm happy with that. Got
Absolutely.
it. I understand.
It just opens that up a little bit. Got it.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, we're catching up. Anything else? Nothing? So, let's see if I have any more questions. I'm trying to keep the conversation going a little bit longer.
Don't have to do that.
That's true. It's true. Just want to make sure that we're doing our homework here and that we're providing proper feedback to staff. No, I think it's good. That's I think a little bit where I was hung up with the 18th Street Metro Rail limitations. And so we're just opening up. So negotiations can be a little bit more typical almost, right? So that's good. Thanks for that explanation. I think that's it. I think, if there are any closing statements or
Public
any
comments?
thoughts?
We need to do public comments.
Yeah, let's do some, do we have any, public comments?
So, Mr. Cummings, appears to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'd like to speak.
I was just going to say that as it relates to above grade versus below grade parking, I think you will see above grade parking be the first thing that's targeted as developers may look at their parking inventory and say, hey, you know what, I think we've got more than we need, but rents are so high. Why don't we start taking a look at adding some units? Because that's the opportunity to get light and air in, to have windows, to have the types of units or uses really that are going to generate the most income. I think your below grade spaces would be the last and final to actually get converted to anything else, just because of the undesirability of being, deep in the ground, especially in Roslyn with all that bedrock and drainage issues and everything else, right? So I do think that you're going to see that above grade parking targeted first, and it'll just depend on, when we get to that inflection point of when developers start to look at the parking supply and say, hey, it's not helping as much for leasing versus the opportunity to get more rent out of the space that we already have. So, we'll
Great.
see when that happens, but I bet you it'll happen one day.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I did want to note that Mr. Ventrone, who's joining us virtually, now if he's able to unmute, Mr. Ventrone, can you hear us? He indicated that he was having some technical challenges. He did provide some comment in the chat that, and he is attending as a board member of the North Roslyn Civic Association, and will encapsulate these comments in your staff report that you see in July. And I've also provided him the link to provide comment to Zoco. He mentioned that he and his neighbors appreciated CoStar's 13.9 million contribution to Gateway Park, but they have some concerns about losing the public use of the observation deck for the neighborhood and Arlington's residents. They intend to be engaging in the site plan amendment process and proposing a condition for this, so that the county would require CoStar to provide use of meeting space to the building for any nonprofit use. So, and he indicated that he's going to use the written comment form. So
Thank you, Mr. Ventrone. And correct me if I'm wrong, but while I also share that concern, I think this is not the forum to discuss that particular issue, right? That's essentially county boards that's made. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of say on it. But yes, I would have loved to have seen that space be repurposed for something a little bit more community-based. Is that it then?
I believe so. I don't think we
Do
have.
you have
any other
anything
public
to
comments.
add?
Just appreciate the conversation tonight. Again, Ally, and county staff's efforts to help educate people. This is a lot of information.
Yeah.
Just proactively let people understand the process. So we're here tonight to listen and
Great, thanks for coming. It is a little arcane at times, so I appreciate staff's patience with our series of questions and sometimes clarifications. Any final comments from any of the commissioners? No? All right, with that, I think we're gonna call this meeting to an end.
All right.
Thank you very much.